Welcome to Thrive Deeper, the podcast based on the Thrive Bible Reading Guide. This is the ongoing conversation about God's Word with Thrive's author, Dr. Matthew Jacoby, and your host, DJ Payne.
G'day and welcome to Thrive Deeper episode 82. It's your old pal DJ Payne and a big season's greetings. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, whatever this weird limbo week is between Christmas and New Year. I hope you're having a great one. I hope you're having a holiday with friends and family and getting into the Word of God. Now, on this week's episode 82, we are looking at Genesis chapters 28 to 31. Matthew and I sit down and go through these chapters as we are loving reading about the life of Jacob and how God makes him Israel. How do we go from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob into the people of the Jews? Well, keep on listening and you'll find out on Thrive Deeper. Okay, Matt, we're not just finishing off a year, we're not just saying goodbye to 2019, we are saying goodbye to a decade.
We are. That just occurred to me actually just recently. I didn't think of that, but that's significant, isn't it?
It is. We've gone through the aughts, the 20 aughts. The 2010s are what we're finishing now, or some people are calling it the 20-teens, but the 2010s, and we're about to enter the 2020s. We're about to enter the 20s. So
20s.
The 20s. It's going to be interesting. Do you get sentimental at the end of a year?
Not particularly.
Yeah.
Should I? I'm not.
Yeah. Do you get sentimental at all?
Yeah, I do. I can.
I'm not saying whether you can, but do you? I'm the type of person that at the end of a year, for New Year's Day and the beginning of a brand new year, I love moments like that. I love the fresh, the fresh slate, the blank piece of paper, the taking stock and sort of seeing what the narrative of your life have been like. I'm a big one. You know me, I'm a big one for journaling. Yeah. And at a junction like that, I don't know. I intend to inject a lot of meaning into it.
I do like New Year's when I look forward to a new year. I often reflect on what I want to do differently or what I want to establish that's new patterns, new habits. Yeah. I often think about that actually at the opening of a new year. Yeah. You have that sort of Christmas break and it's all a bit chaotic, but then you start the new year and it's like it's that clean slate.
All right, well I'm going to put you on the spot. 2020. What's the what's some of the habits?
There's
can you fit any more good habits into your life?
No, one of the things that I think has that I've felt very much lately is just a kind of a inner kind of chaos enveloping my mind, like just overactive, getting back to that almost hyperactive mind thing. So much activity. And one of the things that I used to do a lot, and I do sometimes, but that is just so important. It was, and I want to ensure that it continues to be, is just being still, sitting still and having that time of stillness before God and waiting on God. And that was incredibly significant for a part of my life, to create that space. It felt like creating a space in a jungle, the jungle of our thoughts. It was like, I'm going to clear a space and it's going to be a space for God.
Pull out the mental machete and hack away and just make us... Yeah,
it's like, because I feel like, God wants quality time, and I feel like we actually have the time. It's what we fill it with that is, we have 24 hours in every day. And it's... But it's the quality part that we struggle with because we tend to get so addicted to stimulation, mental stimulation, that we find spaces in time just amplify our craving for more stimulation. And we feel agitated, and then so you go to your phone or you go to turn on the telly, or it's activity. One of the most important disciplines, I think, and I've actually just started doing this again in the last couple of days, is taking a block of time and just sitting still, and it's just enormously transformative for me. I feel so much more peaceful as a result. And going to the new year, I've thought I need to make this a regular discipline because it brings me back to a beautiful simplicity with God that my whole life needs to grow out of that space.
Can I make a wisecrack here?
Yeah.
You're a pastor, so you've got these big chunks of time you can just sit and be still. What?
Yeah.
Well,
okay, do you know me? Do you know me? Do you know how many things that I do?
I'm teasing. I just had to get it in there. No, it's funny because I think we as a family are on the same tip. I want to make exactly the sentiment that you've just said.
Yeah.
I've expressed to the family that over this summer season, we're going to establish a new habit. We're going to make a time of several hours together once a week, at least once a week, where all devices, including mine, go into a box, phones get turned off, everything get off, and we are going to spend time together in the same room reading or writing. Wow. Something silent together.
Yeah,
we might put some quiet music in the background, but it's not a time. I mean, we have great times of communing, but I think there's something really special. And unless we're intentional and make that happen, like I caught it by accident the other day that I walked into the room to do something and my 3 boys and my wife were busy reading or writing and there was music, nice soft music going in the background. I was like, unless I intentionally make this happen all the time, it's an accident that it happens. Yeah. So it's that, sort of taking responsibility, taking control and say, we're going to force this to happen.
That's great.
And make it like that, because I think that's really important in this day and age of all the, especially with devices everywhere we turn. It's really, really hard. All right, well, let's get back into the book of Genesis. Last week we wrapped up the life of Abraham, this first patriarch of our faith, I guess we could call him. And we saw his son Isaac, the son of promise, the chosen one, finally finding a wife in Rebekah, and then Rebekah having 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau being not the chosen one, not the son of promise, but Jacob being God's chosen one. And we watch them grow up and we see Jacob being the deceiver and stealing the blessing. Not only did he steal the birthright when Esau was younger, but then as they got older, when it was time for Isaac to pass on a blessing before he died, Jacob swindled his brother with Rebekah's help and took the blessing. And as the movie finished last week, Rebekah was like, "Get out of here! Your brother's going to kill you." And he went off to the family, to the place where Rebekah came from, where Abraham came from, the family came from, and he hightailed it out there away from his brother.
Yeah, these stories are strange to say the least, and I think they're particularly strange because we're very used to because you mentioned movie just before, we're very used to a fairly homogenous narrative. Narratives tend to have very similar structures. So when you have very strange stories like we have here, it's very easy to just be completely perplexed. Now, a little bit of context here. Genesis is a lot about establishing a foundation for the identity of God's people. So this is in the context of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, the books of Moses. And it's a lot about laying the foundation for God's people to be God's people. Yeah. And so, there's the revelation of God, but the stories of Jacob are particularly important because Jacob gets renamed Israel. And so there's so much about Jacob that says something about God's people. Now, you look at the story of Jacob and ostensibly he's not a good guy. He doesn't seem to deserve anything that he gets. And that's exactly the point, actually.
That's the point, that's it.
This is the point, is that it's not, and even the fact that he's the youngest, so Esau is the one that rightfully is, and the way that these clans or tribal societies worked is that, the eldest son would basically be the ruler, like the clan leader. Yeah. He would become the next clan leader. But in this case, Isaac is the one that's given the blessing of the firstborn, as we're going to see. And that is completely outside of what is culturally normal. It's not his due. Yeah. And that's the whole point, is that, God is giving something to his people that's not their due. It's not something that they warrant from their lives. And I pointed out last week that the way that Jacob is even characterized, I mean, he is the name Jacob is one who grasped the heel, which basically is a sort of figure of speech for deceiver.
Yeah.
It basically means deceiver.
It's amazing.
Now we pointed out, the other person, only other person in the disciple in the Bible who's known as a deceiver is Satan.
Yeah.
So Jacob is characterized in very much the same way as Satan is characterized, and yet he gets this blessing. Yet God blesses him, and this, of course, is exactly the point. Don't go looking at these stories looking for good people doing good things that we can be inspired by. What we need to be inspired by is God's faithfulness and grace here. And grace means undeserved favor.
That's it.
That's the foundation that these stories are laying down.
Now, I love we get a little bit of at the beginning of this, brand new chapter here in 28, we get a little bit of almost like a refrain. As Jacob is heading out, Isaac almost grabs him and says, "Listen, my son, I'm going to bless you," because Isaac knows that Jacob is the one receiving God's blessing.
Yeah.
And he says, "Do not marry here." He knows what's going on. You're going to go to the people, and God will give you this land that he gave to your grandfather Abraham. Esau's aware of all of this. Esau obviously has promised that he's not going to kill his brother yet. I'm going to wait till my father dies and settle all the funeral. Yeah. But he understands, finally it clicks for him as the wild man that he is that Isaac gave the blessing to Jacob, sent Jacob to the land to get a wife, did not want him to have a Canaanite wife. So Esau does yet another thing that says, "I'm going to do it my way," type of thing. Yeah. Okay, I get it, Dad. You don't want to marry these Canaanite women. I've already got 2 of them. I'll do something good. I'll go to Uncle Ishmael, and I'll go over to Uncle Ishmael, and I'll get a wife from him. Yeah. And so we see at the end here, he gets another wife. He gets a third wife, one of the, relatives of Ishmael there. Yeah. And that's not what not what Isaac wanted. That's not what God wanted there.
No, that's right. As we, of course, Jacob then has to flee. Yeah. No, we're jumping ahead a little bit because, of course, then there's the story and the whole point of him stealing, just to go back to what I was saying before, this whole idea that he steals something. So first of all, he offers his brother this bowl of soup when he's famished, and his brother sells him his birthright for the price of this bowl of soup. And it says there, and so he despised his birthright. But what we're going to see is when did we cover this in the last episode? That the stealing of the blessing, how he dresses up as his brother. Yeah. So again, the point here is that he's not deserving. He's totally not deserving. No. It's like he has something that doesn't belong to him. Yeah. This is really what's being emphasized here. This that he has something that doesn't belong to him, but. And it's not justifying the way necessarily that he gets this, but it is highlighting the fact that he gets something that he doesn't deserve. So his brother hates him. There's this terrible tension between the brothers, as you're saying. Sarah sends Jacob off to Laban, and
on the way he has a dream.
Now, of course, she sends him off because Esau is going to kill him. Really, having been discovered that he's been tricked and he's been done out of his inheritance. And on the way he has this dream. Now this is interesting as I read this, and I'll just read what it says here. It says he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac." And then he repeats the blessing. Yeah. And so you get this pattern with each generation, even many times within each generation. You get this reaffirmation of the blessing.
And I notice in this one in verse 15, God almost doubles down. The Lord God doubles down for Jacob here. He says, and what's more, after repeating all the blessings that he gets, "I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go." And again, this you got to understand. That's Jacob's right. Like in the midst of fleeing, type of thing, and God is like, "I will not leave you until I bring you back into the land that is yours." Like this is talk about undeserved.
Yeah, that's right. You think, why is he getting this favor? And this is the point: is that God has made a promise to him, and this is not about Jacob. This is about God's faithfulness. Now, the interesting thing here that I noted, I think this is the first time that heaven is referred to outside Genesis 1.
Wow.
It talks about the stairway with its top reaching to heaven. And this is interesting because in those first couple of chapters, you get this sense of Genesis, first couple of chapters of Genesis, you get this sense that heaven and earth are sort of one, very much, completely united. Perhaps we could say that earth is like a physical dimension of heaven, or however you want to put that. But here, there's a sense of separation. Yeah. And you get this from the time of Genesis 3. You get this sense of heaven being somewhere else.
Yeah. Up.
Yeah, heaven is up there and God is in heaven and we're on earth. But of course, the repeated thing throughout the Bible is God's saying, I will be their God, they will be my people. I will live with them, and that's what comes out in Genesis 21. So the goal of what God is doing is to bring the two back together.
Yeah.
But you see here, this connection is established, this ladder between heaven and earth. So yes, through the fall, there has been this separation, this sort of great divorce, as C.S. Lewis says, this sort of great divorce between heaven and earth. But a connection is established here through this stairway, and this is, in a sense, God's people are going to become that connection as the mediators between heaven and earth. So again, remember I said this is very much about the identity of God's people, and that vision of the stairway with angels coming up and down upon it is very close to that idea, that mediatorial idea. I will bless you to be a blessing. Yep. So this is all, it's all developing here, as you say, and there are other things. The promise is actually developing and filling out. It's beautiful the way that this works.
And a final note here on the chapter, unless you've got another point here, Matt. Jacob's in awe. He calls the place Bethel, which is the house of God. Yeah. And then Jacob makes a vow. We get a vow back, a promise back from Jacob. He says, rightio, if God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, the Lord will certainly be my God. It's almost he puts the conditions back onto God. And says, radio, okay, you've made this promise. Let me make a vow to you that if you fulfill these things, and it's almost like he adds a few more, give me food and clothing as well. God never promised that he was going to get food and clothing, and if he's going to do this and do that.
I think it's
I know
implicit,
it's implied.
Yeah.
It's implied there. But, I will, God will be my God. I will make this a place for worshiping God. I will give 1/10 of my things to him. He will be my God.
Yeah. It's interesting, the appearance of that, again, the practice of tithing, which we saw Abraham practicing that when he takes the plunder from those nations.
Yeah.
And he gives 1/10 to Melchizedek. And here again, we have this action of giving back to God 10%. So this is, I just point that out because, I think this is a practice that has continuing importance. I think it's one of the great ways in which we can respond to God and express our faith is give back to God 10% of our income. And it's not just something that has to do with the Mosaic law that was just a temporary thing, because it's being established here already in the time of the patriarchs. And certainly it was something that was practiced in the early church, although they didn't limit it to 10%. So interesting that we find that here, again, this practice of giving back something to God.
Right in the earliest, again, this is the foundational books, the foundational chapters of how we are to relate to God. We move then into chapter 29, where Jacob finally arrives in his Abraham's homeland here. Yeah. He sees the shepherds and the goat keepers and everything like that. How do you guys know this guy? And they're like, yes, is he doing well? Yeah, great, fantastic. And then on the horizon, here comes Rachel. Yeah. This is his cousin.
Yeah,
and he sees Rachel, and we get this overly like dramatic moment, a really romantic, dramatic moment. Rachel, his cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and Jacob, basically kisses Rachel, weeps aloud, explains the whole situation, that he is the son of her aunt Rebecca. So Rachel ran quickly to tell her father Laban. Yeah. So immediately it's another love at first sight, type of job here.
Yeah, and he wants to marry her, but Laban's an interesting character in this.
Yes.
Laban is very much like Jacob, and Jacob's going to get some of his own back.
That's it.
Through Laban. Laban's going to just continually, trick and extort and, he offers him the daughter, but for the 7 years of work. For goodness sake, 7 years is a long time.
Well, and it's funny because again we read this with 2020 goggles on, and we have this man Laban who's obviously he's done very well. He's the guy who's running the whole kit and caboodle there, relative of Abraham, an uncle here, and Laban says to Jacob. Jacob obviously tells him the entire story, and says the whole thing, and so he says to Jacob, "You're not going to work for me for free. I want you to work for me. Tell me what your wages are." And he obviously says, "I want your daughter. I want Rachel." Because we find out that she is beautiful. She's got a great figure. She's got sparkling eyes. She's got the whole package. And Laban's like, "Okay, no worries. All right, 7 years."
I know.
7 years. That flies in the face of people wanting to, create a narrative that women weren't valued in this thing.
Right,
and again, it feels bad because we're like, hang on, is he selling her out here? But no, obviously Rachel is like, no, I agree. She wants to marry him. She's the one who's making it all happen. But there's a tradition. But there's a family tradition where Leah, the older sister, should be married first.
Yeah, that's right. And so this is where the trickster comes into play. So the 7 years go by. They have the wedding, and in the wedding night, it's actually Leah that comes in, not Rachel. And Jacob discovers this in the morning. Now, when I was reading this to Ivy, my daughter, she couldn't work out how did he not know? She said, how did Jacob not know that it was Leah and not Rachel? We can suggest some things. Well, first of all, they've had a lot of celebration. Jacob had probably, drunk a bit too much. She's veiled. There are a lot of reasons why they didn't have bright lights like we have. It's in the darkness. So, it's certainly could have happened, but. Laban wants his eldest daughter to be married first. That's a concern, and so he sends her in. And now this is discovered, and in order to marry Rachel, he has to work another 7 years.
And Jacob is furious. You hear the heartbreak and the fury, and he says, "What have you done to me? I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why have you tricked me?" And Laban, without him blinking an eye, he knows what he's doing. He's like, "Listen, work another 7 years." And Jacob agrees. So he's going to work 14
That's right.
years.
So he's getting his own back here.
Yeah.
Laban is deceiving him, and you sense, it's not karma, but there's almost a bit of divine kind of...
You reap what you sow.
You sort of reap what you sow, but here's a taste of this. So in a sense, the deceptiveness is not validated. Like Jacob's deceptiveness is not validated in this because he gets a taste of that.
Now, there's a phrase in this chapter, verse 17, that talks about Leah, poor Leah here, the older sister. And it's translated in different ways. The beginning of verse 17 here, there was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, is the way that the New Living Translation, says it here. Or she had dull eyes, soft eyes. I know we don't really know what it means, but
delicate.
Was she nearsighted? Did she have glasses? Is this something against four eyes?
No idea. No idea.
We don't know.
She's quite a tragic character in this story because she And again, this is more about Laban's deceptiveness and what Laban does wrong, because she is, sent off to a man that is not going to love her because he's so in love with Rachel. Yeah. So she's very tragic.
Very tragic. So even though Jacob has to work for another 7 years, 14 years in total, after the bridal week for Leah, he is given Rachel as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So here he has 2 tents, 2 dwellings, 2 wives.
Yeah.
Both wives have a handmaiden given to them by Laban. We have Zilpah. Is it Zilpah? Have I got that right? For Leah. And then Rachel had been given Bilhah as well. So in his household, he's got 4 women, 2 wives, 2 handmaidens here.
And then we get this complex narrative about them having children. Now, this is where, now of course, this is Jacob's children. And remember, Jacob is going to be renamed Israel.
Yes.
And this is the narrative of the 12 sons. Well, the 12th comes later. Benjamin is the last of the son. But at least in this block here at the end of chapter 39 and the beginning of chapter 30, you get the birth of 11 of those sons and how that happens.
And at the end of this chapter, as we go through 29, we basically get in these final few verses, it is set up that God sees Leah's cry, and God's heart breaks for Leah. God is heartbroken for her, and he sees that she is unloved, and so he gives her the ability to bear children, but conversely closes up Rachel's womb.
Yeah.
And then you just see Leah having these boys and boys and boys, and each one she's like, now my husband's going to love me.
And she recognizes that it's God blessing her in this. So, God is compensating for her pain.
Yeah.
A pain that God didn't cause. This is Laban's deceitfulness that's made this happen.
Yeah.
And, the consequences of human actions are always allowed by God. We're going to see that's important to recognize in these stories because, we were given this level of authority. So we can make choices for better or for worse, and there are consequences to those choices. And here, Leah is in this tragic situation, and yet God is coming in and blessing her in the midst of that.
Okay, so with that in mind, we've closed up chapter 29, and we see Leah giving birth to Reuben, then Simeon, Levi, and then Judah.
Yeah.
Right? Now,
we're getting the 12 tribes of Israel here, just to make that explicit.
Exactly.
This is these 12 sons that are going to come from these
so
women, the 12 tribes of Israel.
So the first 4 are from Leah.
Yeah.
We now, in hindsight, this is thousands of years ago. We know the end of the story. Matt, before we take a break, I want you to speak to this. She's given birth to Levi and Judah.
Yeah.
This is the unwanted wife,
the
wife with the dodgy eyes or whatever it is that Jacob doesn't love like he loves Rachel. But yet God is giving her sons, two of whom are going to be crucial to the future.
So the Levites are the priestly tribe, are going to become the priestly tribe.
Yep.
The ones that work in and around the tabernacle, so very important tribe. And of course, Judah are going to be really the remnant tribe. The Levites are going to be mixed in all over the place. Judah is, and actually with Benjamin as well, is going to be incorporated into Judah eventually. They are going to become the Jews. That's where we get the name the Jews from. So really, there are the 2 significant children there are, as you say, Leah's children.
Yeah. Amazing. All right, let's take a break. We're going to see what happens, as we keep on going with the family history.
We're going to talk about mandrake plants.
You don't want to miss out on that. That's coming up next on Thrive Deeper. G'day, family. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I hope you're having a wonderful holiday season, celebrating the birth of Christ, our Saviour, and getting ready for an exciting 2020, saying so long to the decade that was and getting ready for this brand new decade of the 20s. Now, I'm excited because in the next few weeks, Matthew Jacoby, Stuart Duncan, the man behind the scenes of Thrive, and myself are sitting down and we are mapping an all new year. Not just the year, but our future goals for Thrive. And I tell you what, we've got some great things on the drawing board and we cannot wait to bring them to you. So in the meantime, please reach out to us at thrivetoday.net.au. If you've got any suggestions, any input, any ideas that you would love to see us do, please let us know. Head over to thrivetoday.net.au. You can contact us there. And if you've got some ideas, be our producers, be our executive producers, be our amazing think tank. Let us know what you would love to see. Matthew and myself, or any combination of the two of us, or solo, whatever you want us to do, let us know. We've got some great ideas, but I know that you've probably got some even better ones. So we'll see you over at thrivetoday.net.au. While you're twiddling your thumbs in this weird limbo week in between Christmas and New Year's, we'd love you to go over there and say g'day. All right, let's get back into Genesis on Thrive Deeper. It's Thrive Deeper, DJ Payne here with Matt Jacoby, and we are making our way through the book of Genesis. We're about to embark on Genesis chapter 30. We have just finished off seeing Leah with 4 sons to Jacob, and now we cross back over into the Rachel household, and Rachel is a broken woman. She is pleading with Jacob, give me children or I'll die.
Yeah.
And Jacob's response is like, am I God? Take it up with him. He's the one who's doing it, not me.
That's right.
And so Rachel, in again, patterns, we see the patterns here.
That's right.
Rachel says, take my maid, take my handmaid here, Bilhah, and sleep with her. She will bear children for me.
Yeah.
Now, wouldn't it be great if any of these men were, like Jacob, like his grandfather, were able to say, maybe not. Maybe I won't sleep with this woman that you're giving me.
Yeah, well, he should have.
Yeah.
He should have said that.
Yeah.
Because he should have learned that, God comes through on this stuff. That was the case with Isaac and Rebecca. Because Rebecca, of course, she was barren as well, and God enabled her to have children. Yeah. Same with Sarah and Abraham. So there are these natural obstacles that seem to be there along the way, that God has proven that he will overcome those natural obstacles. Now, of course, we remember the story of Abraham and Sarah, and how Sarah gave Abraham Hagar, and it was this attempt to kind of help God. But they shouldn't have done that. Yeah. God doesn't need our help, wants us to serve him, not help him. Yeah. So this is them taking things into their own hands. So to Rachel's handmaiden, Jacob has Dan and Naphtali, right? Then Leah realizes, hang on, I've stopped having children. I'm not getting pregnant anymore. Yeah. So why don't you take my handmaiden? Yeah. Now, you get this sense now that Jacob is just like, hey, ladies, there's plenty of me to go around. He's fine with whatever is going on here. Yeah. He takes Zilpah, and she has Gad and Asher for Leah. And it is like this competition between these two sisters on who can give the most children to their man. It's interesting too which children are born to who. Like there's children that God gave, we've already observed. Reuben. Now Reuben actually doesn't become one of the tribes. It's actually Joseph. His 2 sons. It's kind of complicated, but his 2 sons take the place. Take the place. And Simeon sort of gets absorbed as well into Judah. And then you've got Levi as well. They're spread out. They're the Levites and Judah. So you've kind of, this is all of that to say, this is kind of northern tribe northern kingdom, southern kingdom stuff going on here.
Yes.
It's sort of anticipating the division of the kingdom. Now, it's interesting because we don't know exactly when all of this had its final form, but you see perhaps here indication as it gets chaotic and they take things into their own hands. And then they have, Dan is the first child that's born there. And of course, Dan becomes, in the book of Judges, we see becomes almost one of the worst offenders of the tribes, of Israel. I'm not sure. I just wonder whether there's a lot of all of the tribes that come now are the northern tribes, which became known for their idolatry and not doing things the way that God wanted them to do. Yeah. And so whether the somehow the birth circumstances somehow augur that.
It's not in. Yeah. Well, it's not in. As you said last week, none of this is in there by accident.
Yeah, that's right.
None of this. So I would say if you're a bit of a nerd, if you're a bit of a Bible geek, and you're setting out reading through this for the very first time, make notes, make little notes of who's with who, and then remember whose was whose. We then get a fantastic story, Matt, and this is what I can't wait to hear you explain this one. Reuben, the firstborn son of Leah, who obviously now is a young man working in the fields. He could be an older teen. He's out there in the wheat harvest, and he sees some mandrakes growing in the field, and he brings them to his mother Leah. Rachel sees her sister with these mandrakes, and she says, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. Leah's like, wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Now you're going to steal my son's mandrakes too? Rachel answered, I will let you sleep with Jacob tonight if you give me some of the mandrakes. First question, besides there's 100 questions here. What the heck are mandrakes?
Mandrakes are these. They're a common plant in. Obviously not common because they were difficult to find. But I should say they. It's one of the plants that still grows in the Middle East, and it had these magical associations to it. It has this root system that actually looks a little bit like. A woman, like it's a figure, that sort of figure. And so they looked like, and they were therefore associated because they had this figurative sort of look with the body and the legs and
like a fertility
symbol. Okay. So they had this magical association. Now this is interesting because particularly with their association to fertility, he finds this mandrake plant. It must have been one that was developed enough to look like a really good specimen of a mandrake plant that had this figurative look. And so remember, these are people living in the ancient world. We're not down the track where they
know the law,
where they know the law and idolatry and superstition, and not that when they even did have that law that they followed it. But so here again, they're kind of taking things into their own hands. And so mandrake plants become this opportunity to use this in some. I'm not sure exactly how they used it as a sort of fertility
ritual
solution.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So so they're fighting over the mandrake plants for that reason.
So Leah runs out to Jacob as he's coming back and says, it's all agreed. You're sleeping with me tonight. I've got you as my husband.
And Rachel's got the mandrakes.
Yeah.
And she thinks that that's going to help.
But God hears Leah's prayers again and she gives pregnancy to a fifth son, Issachar, then a sixth son to Jacob, Zebulon, and then after 6 sons, she has a daughter, Dinah. And, and again, you hear Leah's prayer for everyone. God has given me a good reward. Now my husband will treat me with respect. I have given him 6 sons and 1 daughter.
Yeah. And then God remembers Rachel, and no reference there to mandrake plants. It's very clear that God is the one that does this. So there was no need for the mandrakes in the first place. Look, I think it's just interesting to note these little little indications of things that are going to be problematic in the future. There's this superstition here that they're wedded to, and they're willing to fight over this. We're going to see a little bit more about this too when these women steal Laban's household idols and take them back. So that's a little, all of these little indications of things that are going to be problems for the 12 tribes of Israel, because we're talking here about Jacob, who is going to be called Israel, and his 12 sons, who are the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is all indicative of what's going to happen in the future.
We then come to, in chapter 30, halfway through chapter 30 here, it's obviously around about that 15-year-old mark where finally Rachel is given birth to Joseph. Yeah. Finally.
Yeah.
This is the one. This is the one. Rachel is like, this is it. Right, and this is around that era, around that time, and Jacob comes into Laban and says, I've fulfilled all my promises. I've gone above and beyond. I've worked for you. And Laban replies, look, I've become, please listen to me, Laban replied. I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you.
Yeah.
Tell me how much I owe you, and whatever it is, I'll pay it. Yeah. And it's this interesting exchange here that Laban understands what is going on and sees God's blessing on Jacob.
And it's interesting here in verse 27 of chapter 30 that it says that he learns by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. So, and this is, we get this, that, God works through these things that are otherwise, it's very clear. And again, we're in the context of the Pentateuch here. This is absolutely forbidden. Now, there's a couple of ways of
interpreting that.
Interpreting that. But I think the NIV in that has probably got that. Probably got that right. We see God speaking blessing through Balaam in the book of Numbers in the future. So God works through these, even the witch of Endor. Remember the witch of Endor? There was in a very roundabout way, God even works through her in a sense. So God is working through these. It's in a way. Remember in the life of Christ, how the demons often acknowledged who Jesus was. So he's learned by divination that he's being blessed because of Jacob. Well, that's actually correct and doesn't validate the divination, but it is actually correct. And so he wants, he wants him to stay, obviously.
Yeah, obviously wants him to stay.
Good luck charm.
So, yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it, a good luck charm. And finally, that you see this going back and forth. They're bashing heads against one another. Jacob is fighting. Laban is wanting him to stay. Jacob wants to go. But Jacob, you can see that Jacob is thinking, listen, if I do stay, I will. There is profit and success here. And then they come up with this crazy scheme. Laban comes up with a crazy scheme about any spotted or streaked sheep or goats,
well, this is Jacob's. This is actually Jacob's scheme. He says, okay, here's the deal. This is what I'll take as payment. I'll go through the flocks. And I think it becomes evident that he's talking about those that are going to be born. So the next lot of the flocks of sheep and goats, that he's going to take the speckled coloured ones. Now, this is quite rare. Speckled, according to the commentaries that I read, is quite a rare colouring. Okay, so Laban thinks,
this is fine.
Yeah, this is fine. Because then there are not going to be many of them.
But Laban cheats again because he takes all of them that are there already.
Yeah.
Takes them 3 days' journey to other sons over there.
So they've either got the white ones or the dark coloured ones, and of course genetically you need speckled ones to create speckled ones.
Yeah. So and Jacob.
So he's getting deceived again. Is the point?
He's getting deceived again. But Jacob takes it in his stride this time, and he becomes some sort of alchemist and takes.
Yeah, this is a strange one.
Poplar, almond, plane trees, strips, bark. He does all this different stuff, putting it in water, making sure he's got the stronger animals mating with the other animals, with the other goats and everything, making sure he's doing it with the water that he's used and all this sort of stuff. In the end, I don't understand any of that, right?
Yeah,
except for the fact that he's getting stronger speckled animals out of all these. Breeding program.
Yeah, let me explain. So Jacob has this ruse where he's going to create speckled coloured. I mean, he's faced with the fact that now, there aren't any. There really isn't any possibility of speckled lambs or goats being born because they're all either dark, dark coloured or white, and so he leans back on this idea that the ancient people had, that what the flocks and herds, what they see when they're mating, determines the outcome of the children.
Yeah.
So he goes and gets this bark and he exposes the inner wood, and basically this is to create so that they see these speckled colours with this bark.
Yeah.
And he thinks, okay, I'm going to do this at the troughs, and while they're mating, because that's, he's thinking if they mate while they're looking at this, then they will. I know that's really strange, but that's what they thought. They thought that what they see while they mate determines the outcome. Yeah. Okay, so he thinks this is his way of doing this. But the point again is he doesn't have to do this. This is a kind of superstition going on here. Well, it's maybe a way of trying to take things into his own hands. But the point is he doesn't need to do this because God had promised to bless him.
Yes.
Okay, so the outcome is that God does bless him, and amazingly, miraculously, all of these next generation of sheep and goats are born speckled coloured, right? Because God has blessed him. And he even admits later in chapter 31 that it was God that gave him the vision, not to do the thing with the bark and this superstitious ceremony, but God was the one that, because he had this dream about speckled coloured animals, and so he feels that God was the one that told him to offer that to Laban. Yep. Laban thinks, great, this is we're not going to have many of them, and I'm going to take ones out of the flock that are speckled anyway. Yep. So this becomes for Laban, this is good news. He can rip off Jacob, but God is going to do the unlikely. God is going to create what is otherwise not only unlikely, but once Laban removes the speckled animals from the flock, becomes impossible. God is the one here that does the impossible. The point is that he doesn't have to go through this. Just in the same way as Rachel didn't need to use the mandrakes. There are all of these little indications of these people taking things into their own hands. So for later readers, this is not about looking at Jacob saying, let's all do as Jacob did. What later readers are meant to see is see the faithfulness of God despite what Jacob and Rachel did. See that God came through on this. They didn't need to do that because, of course, one of the biggest prohibition in the Pentateuch, in the law of Moses, of course, is that of idolatry and superstition and this kind of thing.
I wonder if part of it, in reading chapter 31, when God has given this, promise to Jacob and saying, listen, whatever you do, God basically says, I'm going to do it all. You'll be fine. Like whatever we decide, you're going to, these are going to happen. I wonder if Jacob doing all this hoopla with the bark and the stuff like that was to really throw Laban's sons off the scent. That, I wonder if part of it is Jacob is
That's been suggested, yeah.
Yeah, like Jacob's doing this great big shimmy show over here, shucking and jiving, and they're going, oh, wow, okay, we better try it over there. And you see this competition. Meanwhile, Jacob knows it's totally rigged. Yeah. The game is totally rigged. Yeah. God has said he's going to do this. But the point here, when he calls Leah and Rachel and basically says, look, God has spoken to me. Your father's attitude has changed towards me. Yeah. Your brothers and your cousins and nephews and everything else, they're all grumbling against me because God is blessing us.
They think Jacob is robbing them when actually it was the other way around.
Exactly.
Yeah. In fact, there's a covenant thing here. It's, those who curse you, I will curse. So, what's his name? Laban tries to basically rob Jacob, but it comes back at them. There's the principle that those who curse you, I will curse principle is expressed in the Psalms in terms of, he who spread a net for me has been caught up in it himself.
Yeah.
There's this idea going on here that Laban spread a net for Jacob, but he's been caught up in it himself. He's the loser here.
And I want to bring another point yet again. I'm going to bang on about this because I had an exchange with someone about this just recently, about talking about the Old Testament, wanting to paint women a certain way. Jacob just doesn't do this by himself and says, "Come, wives, let's go." Jacob pulls them aside and explains the whole situations to his wives and says, listen, this is what's going on. And then we get recorded that Rachel and Leah respond and say, hey, listen, that is fine with us. We're with you because we won't inherit the father's wealth. Our father did the wrong thing by us because you paid. We find out that Jacob has paid money as well for his wives. Yeah. They realize that money has been squandered. They will not receive any of it. It's going to be children. So they say, do whatever your God has told you to do. We are with you.
Yeah, that's right.
And they do that. So Jacob goes, right, let's go. So he puts all of the wives, all of the children on his camels. He takes the livestock and everything like that, and they set out for the land of Canaan where Isaac was living. Yeah. We find out at the time they left, Laban was out looking after the sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household items, idols, and hid them there, and they crossed over. Now, why do you think this is idolatry on her part, or is it the motivation that, Father, you've given us nothing, I'm going to take something of value?
I think it's that, and it's there. Obviously, these household idols are valuable enough for him to pursue them. He's more worried about them than about his daughters. He's complains about not being able to say goodbye to his daughters, but he's very concerned about the household gods. I think, yes, it is. They're trying to steal something valuable from him because they feel ripped off. Yeah. But again, I think this is preempting something again, that there is this idolatry, the idols were hidden in amongst the stuff. So this is these little indications of things that are going to be problems later on. Because there's still... There's the fact that he had household gods, that they're not worshipping the one God, and so for them this is, I guess, a lapse of faith on their part. I mean, they know the true God because they've already acknowledged that. They've acknowledged that God has helped them. They've both acknowledged that God has helped them give birth and that He's with them. And yet they still feel like they need to go and get these household gods and take them. So this is a little bit of a slap in the face of God at this point on the part of these women. But the point again here is it's preempting something.
Yeah, it is preempting something. We get Laban in hot pursuit, and we get a reference here. God calling him, the writer writing saying that Laban is called Laban the Aramean, which is an interesting distinction here now. But God appears to Laban in a dream as he's pursuing him and says, "I'm warning you, leave Jacob alone." Yeah. Laban still pursues him, catches up with him, but instead of like some sort of act of war or anything, Laban is feigning this. How dare you take my daughters away and without letting me give you a goodbye dinner and let me kiss my grandchildren and let me do this and let me do that. But in the end, we really we find out here. He says at the end there, "I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me." He doesn't say your God, the God of your father appeared to me and said, "Leave Jacob alone." He says, "I can understand your feeling that you must go and your intense longing, but why have you stolen my gods?" My gods. So, and Jacob's like, "What are you doing?" He has no idea what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. And even when he goes into the tent to get them, is it Rachel? Is it Rachel or Leah?
Rachel.
It's Rachel says she hides them and she's sitting on them. Yeah. And she said, anyway, she says, I've got my period. I can't stand up. So it's a strange little section. That and so he goes away. And so the point is that they're still in their possession. Yeah. He doesn't go away with them. So what happens to those? We don't hear about those household gods again. No. And I think the stories just leaves you with that. There's just this little thorn in the side here, there's this little bit of poison here that's going to cause problems later on.
Yeah. And we finish off this chapter and it goes on. There's a big exchange between them two. They basically come up with a covenant between the two of them. Laban and Jacob come to an agreement. They build a pillar and they say, listen, this is our memorial between the two of us. You head that way. I will stay this way. God will judge us, between us. Yeah. And then Jacob, we come to the end here, that Jacob takes an oath before the fearsome God of his father Isaac to respect the boundary line. And Jacob offers a sacrifice to God. And he is, and then Laban gets up, kisses all of his family goodbye, and he left in return home. We see the parting of the two. And Jacob, his two wives, the two handmaids, and all of these children, servants, riches, everything.
And flocks of sheep and goats.
Exactly. Hearkening back to, his grandfather Abraham of being brought up into this great wealth, they're heading back home.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think it's really important with these strange stories that we take a step back and look at the elements of the story and how this fits into the bigger narrative. And so this is, as I've been repeatedly saying, this is establishing something here about the identity of God's people. There's the theme of idolatry here, but the big theme is God's faithfulness despite the idolatry and the deceptiveness and the taking things into their own hands. God is faithful. God has promised something, and we get this stream of faithfulness flowing through all of that mess. It's a very messy story, but God's faithfulness is flowing through that and despite that. And the big message here is that what God said will be so.
Even though we don't really plan exactly how things are going to fall during the time of the year, I've got to say, this has been a great time to read through this story of Jacob/Israel. Because at the end of this decade, at the end of 2019, no matter what we've done, no matter who we are, no matter what our reputation is, we can see that God has called us to something higher. And when we make ourselves available to Him, He is faithful to bring us into this new time. So what a great chance to take hold of all of those promises as we look ahead and about to start this brand new year, this brand new decade in front of us. Now, like I said, we have got a lot of plans coming up for Thrive and everything we want to do with the podcast and a lot more. So please, if you want some input, if you want to give us some ideas, or you want to get the inside scoop, head over to thrivetoday.net. On behalf of myself, Matt and Stuart, Happy New Year.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Thrive Deeper. Matthew and DJ would love to hear your questions and comments about what you are reading in God's Word and in Thrive. The easiest way to do that is to head over to thrivetoday.net.au. Thrive Deeper is on Facebook. Just search and like Thrive Today page for all our latest news. Until next week, our prayer is that this podcast will inspire you to read God's Word and thrive.